Hello, everyone. We are live on YouTube, so welcome and Happy New Year to everyone that is listening. We have three of us. 3 out of 4 is not a bad start to the new year. We're getting there. We're slowly getting better. Episode 1, we had the two of us. Episode 2, we had two of us. And episode 3, we have three. So it's on the way up. Welcome to all of those new listeners that are joining us for the first time. We will kind of recap why we're doing this podcast, but before we do, let me introduce the rest of the panel today. Alan, how are you, Mr.
I
Block?
am great, thank you.
Interesting. And Greg, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I've just
Testing,
realised
testing,
I'm
1, 2,
jealous
3.
of Alan's setup. Like,
Yeah.
when did you get the furry mic?
Well, I had this mic for a while, but I bought a little dead cat to put on it.
Yeah, we got to upgrade you, Greg. We'll get you upgraded. But yeah, did you gents all have a good festive break? Greg, how was the first Christmas with the little one?
I've come to two realizations. Number one is that I actually think that parents should get multiple votes in a democracy. Like, the amount of I need to do things to make you not die is incredible. And then the second is you don't know until you know. The lack of sleep is really a thing.
It absolutely is. The struggle is real. But the struggle is also real when it comes to generative AI, I think. We toyed around the first couple of episodes on some of the challenges we've got. We know the tech works. I think we've come to a place, Alan and Greg, where we certainly are convinced, certainly, that the tech works and it's there and there's value to be had. But I think when we were chatting just briefly before we went live, we think that part of the problem isn't that the tech, whether the tech works or not, but it's barriers to adoption of the tech. And I just wonder, with the likes of, perhaps we can explore, some of the news of the GPT Store now opening, and sort of, it's almost like an app store, isn't it? It's like a Google App Store or something where everyone can create their own GPT and share it, and maybe make a few pence here and there, but I don't think we're going to see any millionaires necessarily. But let's start there, I guess, with a bit of news. And let's go to you first. What are your thoughts on this opening up of this store?
I think it's like, well, maybe this is going to give away my age, but if you remember when the first app store for the iPhone came out, right? There was all this news about, oh, there's this kid making 10 grand a week because he wrote a little game, right? And then everybody wants to do that. So everybody learned, what was it, Objective-C at the time, to write their own game. And then, me included, actually, I wrote a game that made a total of $4 over its lifetime. And I think we're going to see that, right? That there's going to, and it's actually going to be a lot worse. And we're going to see the type of volume where, everybody posts their own stuff on YouTube, because the barrier is probably the same or a little bit less, because you got to just type some stuff in a chat and then you think you've created a custom AI. So there's going to be a lot of noise, a lot of, I guess, like, OpenAI is going to pay a lot for storage for all these things, but I don't have any empathy for that. I don't care. And it's going to be very, very difficult to find the few that are going to be useful, right? This also goes to a lesser extent, but the Assistance API, right, which is kind of an API version of the same thing, right? And actually, we've got one example now, right? Like the PMI basically uploaded a couple of documents to the Assistance API and made their own copy of, not even, I don't want to call it a copy of ChatGPT, because it really is a chat interface to the Assistance API, so it's not even a copy, right? And they're planning to charge for it eventually, and I'm like, for being pointed to the documentation that the members already have access to, feels a bit limited, right? And we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, well, here's a different question, Greg. Let's bring you in. What do OpenAI want to achieve by having this store? rather than what the user gets and what's the advantage. It's because remember, there's always some catch, I think, when there's something that's created for the person that owns the platform or whatever it is, right?
So it's like, unless I'm sat in the boardroom of OpenAI, we don't know. I could tell you what I'd do if I was there. I think they're trying to become the infrastructure, as in be the play. Because what's essentially happened is this technology has progressed from unique and held behind closed barriers to commoditized unbelievably quickly. It had a long time of development, and it was a couple of years to essentially become commoditized in people's minds. So you have a whole host of companies. I almost think every single country now is trying to invest in their own version of OpenAI, because they'll consider it a sovereign capability, and all venture capitalists are trying to find like competitors. And if you've got a commoditized technology that everyone's trying to invest in, the only real way to create barriers there is it's the sunk cost fallacy. So if you get people using your system and embedding it within their own applications and their workflows and their processes, the chances of you being removed from that are very low. So, a perfect example of this would be things like Google email.
Mm.
There were lots of free emails, but everyone signed up for Google. How many people have got rid of that and decided to go to? You don't, because you can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And it would be the same here. So I actually think that this whole app store, it's one of the textbook plays in how to become an infrastructure layer.
Interesting. You have thoughts on that as well, Al?
Yeah, so I think the play for the custom GPTs is actually to replace AWS. Hear me out on this.
Ooh, okay. I'm interested in this one.
So I made this call a couple of months ago. The next step for LLMs is not text, it's UIs. We're starting to see it come out now. We've got v0.dev, which is we can generate AI and generate UI and iterate it by prompting an LLM. You're seeing it. Was it yesterday or the day before with Microsoft Sophia, which is eventually going to replace Power BI entirely, and we're going to have AI replacing user interfaces, or the creation of user interfaces, right? So when you have that happening, then the GPT is the infrastructure. You're absolutely right. But the thing that it's actually then threatening is the people that make money from infrastructure, right? So we're gonna be in this world in a few years where you're not going to be able to extrapolate between AI and the internet, and they're going to be virtually the same thing. And this is the beginning of the play for OpenAI to put itself in the middle of that, basically.
Wow. For those that it's new to the news, Sophia, tell us a bit more about that. What do you know?
Yeah, so Sophia was released this week, I think. And it's think Power BI, but if you could talk to a model that generates the dashboards for you when you talk to it and changes them, and you ask a question and it creates a new dashboard to answer your question. That's basically what Sophia is. Haven't tested it. It's in pre-release. You have to join either Sam Altman or Satya Nadella to actually be invited to that list. But they're marketing it, right? So I'd say like 6 months away. And it's a very interesting take. One that it was probably written on the wall for a few people that paid attention, but user interfaces, the way they are today, are about to expire.
And when you say talk to it, you actually mean verbally speaking to it, right?
I guess adding a voice interface is, usually like a 20-second thing once you have text, right? So you can type, or you could, I'd be surprised if you couldn't just speak to it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, Greg, if I bring you back in, is that user interface. But it's quite interesting because one of the things I've noticed is that those of us that use ChatGPT or any other, um, AI sort of large language model chatbot, you improve your prompting, right, as you go, because you want to get better returns. And so if we bring in voice, we're going to have to get better at the way we communicate. And one of the things I was actually thinking about potentially chatting on one of the episodes was around how generative AI actually influences or improves human interaction in behaviors, engagement, attitudes. Does it play a part or not is, I guess, the starting point. And I wonder I just wonder if we're going to start interacting and having to improve our communication with AI, will that mean we improve our communication with each other?
I'm gonna say there that it really really depends, because I've seen things to the positive and I've seen things that really worry me actually. So you're right. Things to the positive, to put a speech module, like speech to text. Yeah, that's an easy thing, and then
Yeah.
text to interface. That, like, if you want to speak to it, that's a very easy thing. The question is, do the prompts sound like a conversation you'd have with another human? Are they empathetic? Like, are you actually having, or are you going to train people to talk to something that just isn't human? That's one question. But the positives that I've seen, and actually it's Alan's point. I also believe that the way that humans interact with technology is going to fundamentally change. If you think back in the 2000s, you'd click all the buttons on a BlackBerry, and I still remember like just walking into offices and hearing all those clicking. And then we went to the touchscreen phones, and like you said, an app store and apps were a different way of interacting with technology. It was an easier way of interacting. And now essentially what we're saying is it becomes WhatsApp. It becomes text. So you can just say, rather than going on Google and searching for something, you could just go, hey, what's this? And it does it, which we've had for a little bit with things like Alexa, but this is now going next level, like prepare my finances for the year. Sure. The thing that I've seen that worries me is I've actually seen some companies got funded by VCs, which are things like personal companion replacements. So bots trained to be able to interact with you in a way that satisfies your human desires.
Oh, here we go. Black Mirror.
Yeah, that really worries me.
There's a lot of those. There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
It's actually something that, I had a conversation with someone recently who was just saying like there's at least 50 that are active right now with like virtual girlfriend virtual boyfriend kind of stuff, and those kind of existed before, but now with
to this level,
with Stable Diffusion, it's a lot creepier. I'm going to leave it at that.
Like, you're going to essentially just get an entire AI version of OnlyFans. Like that is to me that is a collapse of values in a society. Okay, they're like human interaction and then going and like talking to people and even asking people out on a date. That bit worries me. I'm like, okay, maybe we should put the brakes on that bit.
And is that leading into it, I guess, and if we bring it back, I guess, to projects and project delivery, that could be a source of good if you put the positive spin on it, right? If you had sort of an oracle that's fed with the right information for projects and maybe even context of that specific project.
Well, let's not get us wrong here, and I'm sure the three of us will actually agree on this. The AI project management workforce is minutes away. Like, if and I've said this to the large consultancies, if you think that people constraints are going to be a thing within 5 years, you've got a very rude awakening coming. The fact that you could go, okay, we need 20 project controllers. Actually, what I need is 5 incredibly experienced project controllers, and I'll get 1 billion robots to do the rest. That billion robots will cost the same as maybe another 5 people. Like,
Yeah.
we're in that point.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. What does it take though to let those minutes pass by faster? Because it does feel like, and Al and I were chatting about this just the other day, that it does feel like there's fairly limited people that are actually using the tech, and that you see the same old people commenting, whether it's on LinkedIn or elsewhere at the conferences. How do we get, I guess, decision makers on projects to broaden their curiosity when it comes to adoption of what is actually possible?
I'm gonna tell you an anecdote, because I think one of the things that needs to change is culture. So I gave a talk recently, and someone came up to me. I will not disclose where, who, or the age of the person, but someone came up to me and said, yeah, AI is interesting, but I don't think it's ever going to work. And they had a printout of an email that they sent to someone to say that AI is not going to work. And it's like, see, this is evidence. And the evidence was an email that they sent. And that type of entrenchment against anything that might be perceived as slightly threatening rather than helpful, because in a sense we have a lot of people that are frightened without learning about the thing, is what's slowing things down a lot. Right. And I'm sure, Greg, you see it in your sales process and when you go and do talks as well.
Yeah, well, I see a spectrum, and it's, to be honest, it's the spectrum that all of the textbooks say has happened. Going back, you have this bell-shaped curve of, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, and it just so happens to be that the early adopters and the innovators and the laggards are the most vocal, and the main people in the center are kind of, there's more important things that they want to focus their lives on. What I've seen is, well, so to say to Dale's question, how do we bring that minute faster? I actually think that it's a multifaceted approach. One is that people are just aware that they have this solution available. The second is on the providers, because you can't take infrastructure like OpenAI and go, cool, that can now do projects. Alan and I know it's bloody hard work to actually properly make it for, like, real hard work to make it for projects. So it's like it's actually on people like us to make it just so easily digestible that it's like, oh, it just does the thing. But then there's an opposite point, which is humans very rarely react to hope, but they react to fear. That's how we're designed. And when competition enters the market, that's when people really sit up. So, for example, I already know of 2 of the massive consultancies that are about to launch digital AI versions of their project controls consultancies. So it's the exact same services, just cheaper and faster and better. And I joked in October where I launched one of these consultancies that just produces AI-driven reports. And it's more just for that. I think, once that person, Alan, comes up to you and goes, oh, it'll never work. And I'm like, what do you do? I do delay and disruption analysis. I'm like, cool. How do you feel about a full delay and disruption analysis for $50? And then they'll be like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, the guy was actually really, really, really nice, right? So I humored him a little bit, and we chatted for a bit, and then so I didn't feel the need to confront him. But yeah, fundamentally, what needs to happen is basically people need to start feeling like they're missing the bus, and then they'll start running for it.
I like that analogy. I like your bus analogy.
Well,
Here's another one. Greg, sorry, just before you add to that, here's another one to add in the mix. Do we, and maybe this is just because of where, the view we're taking, the three of us, and Val would take a similar view, are we looking at it from the wrong angle potentially? Because is there potentially a lower barrier for adoption at the other end of projects? What I mean by that is not in the boardroom, not on the computer necessarily, but if you had an AI assistant in your project on site, when you had issues, resolving those issues on site for you rather than in a meeting room, would that help? Would that lower the barrier?
Well, it really depends on what's the blocker to the virus spreading.
Right.
Like if the blocker to the virus spreading across an entire project is site, then arguably you'd infect the other areas to create a mass of other people to go on site. If the site is the most adaptable to change to that, and then suddenly all of site is using it and the boardroom isn't, etc. I actually think it really depends. For me, it's actually about the niches. It's about like the actual roles that people are trying to do. So a site person is trying to do, a site superintendent is trying to do a different role than a project controls person, who's trying to do a different role than a project director. And it's actually about, how does this actually help me do the critical things in my job? Like, for example, a project director, I'd probably say the most useful thing an AI can do for them right now today is to help them write comms releases and speeches. Because fundamentally, project directors are actually like communications people, like they're setting the vision. I'd say the most valuable thing that AI can do for project controllers today is do analysis. And I'd probably say the most valuable thing that AI can do for like a site superintendent is literally prepare their job cards. So they don't have to do it in the morning, like this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What if they had let's say they had, I don't know, frustrated access on site, and instead of it getting to the boardroom like days, weeks later in some bit of analysis that goes through PMO project controls, that actually on site all the data, or let's say not all the data, let's say enough data is connected for them to be able to make a decision on what to do. So instead of sitting there being frustrated because I don't have access, I can move on to another site potentially. This is how I can remove that constraint, whatever the case might be, in delivery, rather than it sort of being, okay, well, this is how we have to adjust our plan going forward. We can actually just remedy the solution right there. I mean,
yeah, well, this is where what Alan and I were talking about before about the actual AI workforce, because what you don't want to do is break process, because appropriate process, because if you break appropriate process, things start to fall apart. For example, if someone arrived on site and they said, I can't get access, how would they deal with it today? Well, arguably, they should call someone who should then call someone who should then call someone in the scheduling department who should say, okay, please do this. And like, it's that. Or you could just, send a message, hey, I can't get access, picture, what should I do? And then that process is just automated by a piece of AI, and it'll just go, just move to this site. And then the AI will then go and inform everyone, this happened, etc. It's about automation of the specific tasks. But if you think that there'll be tens of thousands of tasks, and it's kind of like as you glue those together, that's when and Alan, you can give it, I'd love your opinion on this, but like as you glue all of these capabilities together, it feels more powerful. It's a feeling. It's really just a lot of tech glued together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is where the roles are going to shift, right? You're going to have, because the most common question is less so at site, right? But there is the never-ending question of, will AI take my job? And inevitably, it will take a part of someone's job, right? But actually, it will create a new part of someone's job, which is figuring out, how do I create these tasks in the AI, right? You're going from doing the repetitive work of executing the process back to designing the process, so it happens so you do it only once, and then it gets done by the AI, right? And so the job descriptions are going to change in that way. And back to site, I think a lot of those things, the processes exist for certain reasons. That much AI to start automating a lot of these things, right? A lot of it is just speed of information flow. And Dale, you're probably closer to this than any of us. But having speed of information, why is that not happening today? Why hasn't it happened in the last 5-10 years? What are the barriers to that happening, so that you click a button and then someone miles away, who's maybe in an office and has all the view of a portfolio, can make the decision and then communicate it back? Why is that not happening at speed, right? Because if you replace the AI with the human, you still have the same pattern, but it is still slow.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is that, if you're on site, your job is not to be in front of a computer or in front of an iPad or in front of a phone, right? Which means that there needs to be a different way to interface with the user, whatever that may be, right?
What do we think that is? What do you think that is?
Well, I think the long-term answer to that is things like Neuralink, no doubt. Well, I know that what is not the answer is HoloLens, which everybody went massively crazy for 5 years ago, and then they sold about 4 of them, and they broke 6 minutes after they were bought. It's not the HoloLens, but there may be hybrids of listening devices, headsets, that sort of stuff, that aren't as intrusive. And the reason why HoloLens doesn't work is the same reason why people don't do AR outside of their home, and most people won't ever do it. And it's because people don't like having their eyes covered.
Yeah. Yeah, this is true, actually. Although, arguably, what you're talking about in your home, you listen to all the time if you've got an Alexa or a Google Assistant or something like that.
Yeah, so there may be something like that, right? It may be in your watch or something, right? That might be an answer. You're like, hey, watch, just tell the project controls department that I can't access the site.
Yeah.
What should I do?
Or it'll be a little headphone or something like that. Yeah. I mean, the way it's actually a lot of fun to forecast future tech, but what I've found is the simplest answer is the correct answer is normally the simplest answer, and normally is related to more closely to what we have now. So what I'd probably say is it's probably a headphone linked to your phone. Now, is your phone going to be in your pocket, or it's going to be on your? I don't know.
Who cares?
Who cares? Yeah. It doesn't matter. But it's probably that. I could just imagine you go hey Alan, please let project controls know this is delayed. And that's all I have to do. And you know what? Project controls can then send a drone over and have a look themselves. I don't need to wear some weird lensy thing and take loads of pictures, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. But arguably as well, using your sort of analogy of someone sitting in a faraway office from site, it reminded me of, I guess, whether you're a football fan, VAR, or the TMO in rugby. And sometimes that slows down the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wonder if we can borrow from a bit of sport that we need to learn some lessons from that as well. So the tech is there, but it needs to be used in the right way.
You're correct. So I've called this. This is the start of the new outsourcing. If you remember in the 80s and 90s, all the American companies were let's stick it all out in China, let's stick it all out in Asia, etc. And it was the new outsourcing because they were going, oh, we can get so much less cost. But then the consequence was that the operation was delayed, etc. Now, AI is the new outsourcing, but the difference is that it's not delayed at all. It's instantaneous.
Yeah.
But it does really open the question around the outsourcing models that have historically been more difficult. So, for example, teams in India that are incredibly well qualified, normally trained in Europe, and can speak fantastic English, etc., but are on the wages in India. It's like, okay, well, can AI help bridge this gap? And actually, what you'll now have is the start of global project teams. So, yes, you'll have lots of people on site. So let's say, I don't know, let's just pick that. Let's say you've got NEOM in Saudi. You've got lots of people on site. Then you've got teams spread around the globe that are in 24/7 communication, facilitated by a workforce that never sleeps and AI. I don't know. Maybe that starts to come to fruition here. Whenever there's massive cost savings to be had, companies normally do something.
Yeah, exactly. And Al, we were chatting about this adoption piece before. Did you have any other sort of areas you think are hindering us from adopting the tech, or at least allowing others to be curious, other than your anecdote there?
I'm gonna fire some shots.
Sure. Love it.
Greg, feel free to back me up or tell me to shut up. But there are a lot of companies right now, and I think I've said this before, that a lot of companies right now that are ruining the reputation of AI. And what I mean by that is companies that are not doing AI at all, that say that they're an AI company, and then you go test out their tech, and it may be useful tech, but just pitch yourself as a software company, because the expectation with AI is that it's going to automate a lot of things. And when it's 3 if statements and a decision tree, that's not AI. It may still be very valuable, but it muddies the water so much that then consumers cannot discern between the two anymore. And it makes it so hard, because then a consumer will come in with an expectation, get something completely different, churn inevitably, but also they'll be burned. AI doesn't work.
Yeah,
I don't care, right?
Yeah.
And I wish that just stopped, right? The problem is that, and it's cool to brand yourself as AI, right?
What is, for those that don't know, the uninitiated, right? If what is the telltale sign if a solution, a tech, it's not software, technology is truly AI, or if it's just software?
If a salesperson uses emotional language to describe it. By the way, I'm just going to say here that there's many sides of a coin, but ultimately, I agree with Alan. What's happened in our industry, at least, and I'm not bitter about it. Actually, I find it quite funny, and because all it's doing is prolonging the inevitable, which is the inevitable decline and death of the old world. What I found is that, so Alan will smile at this. If you build AI for AI's sake, okay, it's not intrinsically valuable in itself. But if you build AI to make a specific user's life far better than the tools they have today, then you actually have a value proposition that is unique. Now, it's not the fact that it's AI, it's the fact that it makes their life better. What I have seen in the market is when you come up against that, imagine being a BlackBerry salesman in the age of the iPhone. Like, the only thing you can do to continue to put food on your table is to lie, essentially, or to do false flag operations. to essentially
Yeah.
say you're AI when you're not, or to create claims that aren't entirely true about different tech, and it muddies the water. But like I said, eventually the food dries up and they move on, or they change different company. But I don't blame anyone. It's like if I had a family and I was responsible for providing, and the way I provided for them was I sold old tech.
Yeah.
I do what I needed to sell old tech.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what we're saying is it's not.
I disagree. There's there's another answer. She's like, make the tech better.
Yeah,
That's not the responsibility of the person at the front. That's the responsibility of it. And you and I know that a lot of the softwares in our industry got bought out by private equity houses about 10 years ago by just finance guys who don't care, who are cash cowing them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, right? So there's no leadership pivoting those things. True.
Yeah. Sales and marketing versus the actual people driving the technology behind the scenes, I think is the key there. But hey, look, we have to wrap up. But I love the fact that we're getting really passionate about this stuff, because this is what everyone needs to hear. Genuinely, we promised you we're not going to be scripted. We promised you that we're going to give you the raw emotion, the raw opinion. We're not always going to agree with each other as well, but I think it's important that listeners hear that and listeners get perspective. And so thank you once again, both of you, for sharing your views, your opinions, and your thoughts. Just a 10-second last thought before we end the pod. Al, you first.
10-second last thought. Honestly, before making a judgment, this is true about anything, but before making a judgment, try using it. Right? Not just AI, just anything. And I see this happening far too much, especially in AI, but also in lots of other places.
Yeah, agreed. Greg?
Mine would be like your mindset. Forget AI. Your mindset as we go through a period of disruption will determine how much opportunity you get presented with. Whenever a market goes through massive disruption, there are always people who end up right on the front, on top, with the massive salaries, etc. And I can tell you what, it's never the people who just said no and had a negative mindset. So what I'd say is just be open and try stuff. Literally, what's the worst that can happen? You get seen as an innovator. And for the people that I've seen who have, doubled or tripled their salaries in the last 2 or 3 years, going from 50 to 150,000 a year kind of thing. It's the young people who've gone, I've embraced and I can write processes, and it's worked.
Yeah. You know what though? Sorry, I'm gonna ask Dale. I'm gonna ask you for your last thought, but I wanna direct it a little bit, right? Because we're appealing, Greg and I, in a sense, with our last thoughts, to people that don't listen to this podcast, and never will, in a sense, right? Because it's called the Generative AI podcast, which means that you have to have found it by looking for a Gen AI podcast in projects. So I guess my question for you, Dale, last thought, is how do we reach out to those that are not, and what should we appeal to our active early adopters audience, to refer back to the adoption curve that Greg was mentioning earlier, and what can they do to change the culture?
So I think it's really important that we recognize that we're dealing with people and not machines here. And yes, it is a niche at the moment, but I think that will change. The way for me personally to spread the word is you'll get those that are curious in organizations, as Greg's referring to there. And it's really important that if you know that the tech works and you're working in an organization, share that with your colleagues. I mean, I remember back in the day when I started out and people started showing me tips and tricks around Excel. I was like, that's awesome, right? Mm-hmm. And I picked that up and I learned it. But that took someone to show me. I didn't go find a podcast. I guess I could have done YouTube back then, but there actually wasn't that much content. I had some amazing people around me that showed me how to use Excel, formulas, VBA, etc. Now, if you, that person, share that with your colleagues. You might not be in the physical office, but if you're on Teams or whatever the case might be, and you see someone struggling, help them. and say there's tech out there. Hey, this is really cool. Have you tried this? I mean, I know that, if I see someone struggling with something and I go, have you tried ChatGPT, even the cheap version, or Bard, or any of them? No, just try it and see what it gives you. Test it with your prompts. Put information in there. Put a document in there. Obviously not sensitive. Put it in there and ask it to summarize it for you. See what it does. I believe videos coming out soon on ChatGPT this year, potentially sometime. So that'll be cool. Ray, look, we got to end the pod, but hopefully, Al, that answers your question.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty more to come from us. We're here all year, many years, hopefully, as the tech evolves as well, as the adoption rates increase too. And hopefully we'll get, a bit of feedback as well as to what people want to hear about. We'll also have 1 or 2 surprises coming up in the future ones. We got some ideas potentially of how you can get involved as the listeners and the audience, and maybe we can chat about some challenges to set you. But for now, we thank you for your time. We thank you for spending about 40 minutes with us. And if there is anything, please do reach out to us. Apologies that LinkedIn Live didn't work for this one. We'll promise to get it working for the next episode 4, in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for spending this episode with us.
Thank you.